The dust cloud from the police cruisers hadn't even settled when I saw her. Karen Whitfield stood at my ranch gate, her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at me like I was some kind of criminal. I had just gotten back from visiting my sick father, and here I was, standing outside my own property with 3 patrol cars surrounding me and officers approaching with their hands on their weapons. "That's him!" Karen screamed into her phone, her voice shrill enough to make the horses in the nearby pasture nervous. "The trespasser with the weapon. He's trying to break into the Riverside Ranch property." I set down my duffel bag slowly, keeping my hands visible. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd been harassing me about my property for the past 2 years was now calling 911, claiming I was trespassing on my own land. Let me back up a few weeks. My name is Marcus Chen, and I inherited Riverside Ranch from my grandfather 5 years ago. It's a beautiful 120-acre property that sits right on the edge of Willowbrook Estates, the suburban development where Karen serves as HOA president. From day one, she's made it clear that she thinks my ranch is an eyesore that ruins her perfect community vision. 3 weeks ago, I got a call that my father had taken a bad fall and needed surgery. I packed quickly, set the security system, and drove 8 hours to Phoenix. Dad's recovery was going better than expected, so I decided to come home a few days early. I hadn't bothered to tell anyone I was returning. Why would I? It was my property. As I pulled up to my gate that afternoon, something felt off. Fresh tire tracks led through the entrance, and the electronic lock looked different. I punched in my code, but it didn't work. That's when I noticed the new realtor's lockbox hanging on the fence. My blood ran cold. I hopped the fence, my own fence, and started walking up the long driveway. That's when I saw them. Karen stood on my front porch with 2 people in expensive suits, gesturing at my house like she owned it. She was mid-sentence when she spotted me. And as you can see, the property has excellent bones, though it will need significant updating to meet modern standards, she was saying. Her face went white when our eyes met. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. The 2 potential buyers looked confused. The man in the navy suit cleared his throat. "Excuse me, but Miss Whitfield told us this was a distressed property sale. She said the owner had abandoned it." "I'm the owner," I said firmly, "and I've been gone for exactly 18 days visiting my sick father. This property is not for sale, has never been for sale, and will never be for sale." Karen's face cycled through several expressions before settling on indignation. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing on HOA-controlled property. This ranch isn't part of your HOA, Karen. It never has been, and you know it." But she was already talking to the dispatcher, her voice taking on a hysterical edge. "911, yes, there's a man here threatening us. He has a weapon. He's trying to break into a property at 1523 Ranch Road. Please hurry." Uh, the buyers practically ran to their Mercedes, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. I stood there, stunned by the audacity of it all. A weapon? I had nothing but my duffel bag and cart. 10 minutes later, the police arrived in force. 3 cars, lights blazing, officers approaching cautiously. I kept my hands visible and waited. "Sir, we received a report of an armed trespasser," the lead officer said. "I need you to keep your hands where I can see them." "Officer, my name is Marcus Chen. This is my property. I have identification and all the documentation." That woman, I pointed to Karen, who was now trying to look victimized, has been trespassing and apparently trying to sell my ranch while I was out of town. "He's lying," Karen shrieked. "I'm the HOA president, and this property was abandoned. I have every right to secure it for the community." The officer looked between us, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Sir, do you have proof this is your property?" "My driver's license has this address. The deed is in my glove compartment. And more importantly, I have security cameras that will show exactly what's been happening here while I was gone." I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. Thank God I'd installed those cameras last year after Karen kept leaving violation notices for things that weren't even HOA jurisdiction. The footage was all there, time-stamped and clear as day. The first video showed Karen approaching my gate 8 days ago with bolt cutters. The next showed her changing the lock. Then came footage of her leading groups of people through my house, moving my furniture, and even bringing in staging decorations. The officer's expression hardened as he watched. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step over here and explain what's happening." Karen's confident facade crumbled. "I was just trying to help. The property was sitting empty, and it's dragging down our community values. Someone had to take initiative. By breaking into my house and trying to sell it? I asked, incredulous. The officer held up a hand. Sir, can you show me your identification and property documents? I handed over my license and pulled the deed from my car. The officer examined them carefully, then radioed for additional units. We're going to need a detective down here. Possible breaking and entering, fraud, and filing a false police report. Karen's face went from red to white. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I was protecting our community. But the officers weren't interested in her excuses. As they questioned her, more details emerged. She'd forged HOA documents claiming the ranch had been annexed into their jurisdiction. She'd contacted multiple real estate agencies, presenting herself as the authorized representative for a distressed property sale. She'd even gone so far as to create fake ownership transfer papers. The detective who arrived took one look at the evidence and shook his head. Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and filing a false police. This is ridiculous, Karen screamed as they handcuffed her. I'm on the city council. My husband is a lawyer. Then he'll know how serious these charges are, the detective replied calmly. As they led her to the patrol car, Karen turned back to me, her face twisted with fury. This isn't over. That ranch is a blight on our community. You'll see. The investigation that followed was thorough and damning. Detectives found a folder in Karen's home office containing detailed plans to force me out and sell the ranch to developers. She'd been collecting HOA dues from my neighbors under the pretense that the ranch would soon be annexed, money she'd apparently pocketed. The local news picked up the story within days. HOA president arrested in ranch fraud scheme made headlines across the state. Security footage of Karen with bolt cutters became a viral sensation. The HOA board called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove her from her position. Her husband, David Whitfield, a respected attorney at a downtown firm, found himself fielding calls from reporters and angry neighbors. The law firm placed him on administrative leave, pending an investigation into whether he knew about his wife's activities. 3 weeks later, I sat in the courtroom as Karen stood before the judge. She'd aged years in that short time, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and worn. The prosecutor laid out the charges, each one carrying significant penalties. On the charge of criminal trespass in the first degree, how do you plead? Not guilty, Karen said, her voice barely above a whisper. On the charge of attempted fraud over $50,000? Not guilty. On the charge of filing a false police report? Not guilty. The judge reviewed the evidence, including my security footage, the forged documents, and testimony from the potential buyers she'd misled. His expression grew sterner with each piece of evidence. Miss Whitfield, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You're looking at potential felony charges that could result in up to 15 years in prison and fines exceeding $100,000. Karen swayed on her feet, gripping the defendant's table for support. Her attorney, not her husband, who'd filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences just days before, requested a recess. As we left the courtroom, I overheard Karen on the phone with someone, her voice breaking. Mom, I need you to mortgage your house. The bail is set at $75,000, and David froze our accounts. The final hearing came 2 months later. Karen, faced with overwhelming evidence and abandoned by her former HOA allies, accepted a plea deal, 8 years in prison, $50,000 in fines, and a permanent restraining order keeping her 500 feet from my property. As the judge read the sentence, Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. 8 years, she wailed, but I was just trying to improve the neighborhood. The judge's gavel came down with finality. The defendant has shown a complete disregard for property rights, the law, and the safety of others by filing false reports. This sentence reflects the severity of these crimes. Karen's mother, sitting in the gallery, let out a strangled cry. The courtroom deputy moved closer as Karen gripped the table, her knuckles white. Your Honor, please. I have children. I've never been in trouble before. According to the pre-sentencing report, your children are adults living in other states, the judge replied sternly. And while you may not have a criminal record, the elaborate nature of this scheme shows careful planning and intent to commit fraud on a massive scale. The 120-acre property you attempted to steal has an estimated value of $3.2 million. Karen's attorney placed a hand on her